I had spent days preparing for what I thought would be a warm, normal Christmas dinner, full of laughter, food, and the faint comfort of family traditions. The tree twinkled in the corner, ornaments catching the light in a way that should have made everything feel magical. But instead, it all felt fragile, like a thin glass shell waiting to shatter. I greeted everyone with a forced smile, trying to push down the anxiety that always crept in when my mother's sharp eyes fell on me. Conversation hummed around the table, forks clinking against plates, the smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon filling the air, and I tried to immerse myself in it, hoping maybe, just this once, it could feel normal. Then, without warning, my mother leaned back in her chair, laughed that cruel, high-pitched laugh I knew too well, and said, "We're ashamed of you." The words hung in the air like smoke, curling round me, choking me. I froze, every nerve firing, my stomach twisting. Laughter erupted from some of the relatives, uncomfortable snickers from aunts and cousins I barely knew, and even my siblings looked momentarily stunned. Though I caught the flicker of guilt in their eyes, I felt heat rise to my face, humiliation spilling into every corner of my body, and I wanted nothing more than to disappear. My fork shook in my hand, the cranberry sauce glinting red against the plate as I tried to steady my racing heart. I kept my mouth shut, swallowing words that threatened to escape, because no matter what I said, I knew it would be dismissed or twisted into fodder for more laughter. Round me, I saw a spectrum of reactions: my father's avoidance, pretending not to hear, my younger cousin whispering a confused question to his mother, my brother biting the inside of his cheek as if he, too, were trapped in a moment that shouldn't exist. That single sentence had fractured the room, shifting invisible alliances and unspoken rules. I realized, in that instant, that my mother had orchestrated this performance, fully aware of the effect it would have on me, and the seed of anger, sharp and simmering, was planted. Christmas cheer was replaced with tension so thick I could almost taste it, and I understood, painfully, that no one in that room would come to my defense. Not now, not ever. The remainder of the evening stretched ahead like a gauntlet, every laugh, comment, and clink of silverware reminding me of my position at the edge of the family's love. Yet beneath the humiliation, a quiet, stubborn ember of resolve began to glow. They might try to shame me tonight, but I knew something was stirring, something that would not let this moment define me forever. As I retreated to my bedroom later that night, the echoes of my mother's laughter still ringing in my ears, I sank onto the edge of the bed, letting the weight of years press down on me. It wasn't just tonight. It had been decades of subtle slights, of favors given to everyone else but me, of achievements ignored or minimized, of compliments reserved for my siblings while my efforts went unnoticed. I remembered my 10th birthday, when my mother made a fuss over my brother's school award, but handed me a perfunctory pat on the shoulder, barely meeting my eyes. I recalled family vacations, where I was left out of photos, or the countless dinners when she'd serve the best portions to everyone else, leaving me scraps and an unspoken message: "You matter less." My thoughts wandered to the high school graduation she barely attended, distracted by my cousin's accomplishments, and the sting was as sharp now as it was then. Every memory felt like a thread in a tapestry of neglect, a pattern I had tried to ignore, and now could see clearly, stitched with favoritism and invisible cruelty. I wondered how many times I had internalized her disdain, thinking I wasn't worthy, thinking the problem was me rather than her. Tears blurred my vision as I realized how long I had carried this invisibility, how silently I had suffered while the world seemed to validate everyone else. And yet, amid the shame and hurt, a quiet understanding began to form. This was not who I was. Their neglect did not define my value. If anything, enduring it had given me perspective, an awareness that perhaps one day, the scales would tip and I would no longer be invisible. I closed my eyes and allowed myself a deep breath, feeling a mixture of sorrow and a nascent determination, knowing that the seed of change had already taken root, ready to grow into something undeniable Every family gathering felt like a carefully staged play, and I had long since learned my rule: the overlooked, the quiet one, the invisible presence at the edges of every conversation. My siblings flitted around, effortlessly earning praise, hugs, and attention, basking in the glow of my mother's approval. My sister's every word was met with laughter and encouragement, while I found my attempts at sharing drowned out or dismissed. Cousins whispered behind hands, smirking when a joke was made at my expense, not realizing or not caring that I could hear. Even the adults, aunts and uncles who should have intervened, often nodded or smiled politely, their silence validating my mother's cruelty. It wasn't just favoritism, it was a system of passive reinforcement that reminded me of my place. At holiday dinners, I watched my brother receive praise for his career moves, my achievements glossed over like they didn't matter. The contrast stung, sharp as icy wind on bare skin, a constant reminder that no matter my efforts, I would never occupy the center of this family's world. I began noticing the small rituals, the eye rolls exchanged between favored relatives, the subtle smirks at my failures, the way my mother's gaze softened only on the man realized that I was constantly measured against an impossible standard. The resentment simmered quietly beneath the surface, mingling with a deep, aching loneliness. I longed for connection, for acknowledgement, for someone to step in and recognize me. But each gathering reinforced the truth. In this family, I was expendable, a shadow in the corner. And yet, amidst the sting of exclusion, a seed of clarity took hold. Understanding these dynamics, seeing them laid bare, gave me a strategy I had never considered before. If the system of favoritism was so rigid, perhaps it could be dismantled, one deliberate move at a time. That night, lying awake with the house silent around me, I realized I had spent too long letting them dictate my worth. The humiliation, the favoritism, the whispered judgments, they had shaped my life far too long, and I knew something had to change. I didn't shout or lash out. I understood the power of patience and subtlety. Instead, I began plotting quietly, weaving together a plan that no one could anticipate. It started with small steps: gathering information, observing patterns, noting who could be influenced or leveraged. I thought about my career, my finances, my social connections, all things my family had ignored or underestimated. Each piece felt like a puzzle that, once assembled, could shift the balance in my favor. I pictured moments of quiet triumph, small wins that would accumulate until the humiliation I had endured would be reversed. The idea wasn't revenge in the explosive sense yet. It was strategy, a calculated reclaiming of my power that would make them reconsider every slight they had ever delivered. As I traced these thoughts in my mind, a thrill ran through me, both fear and exhilaration, knowing that, for the first time, I held the cards. No one suspected I was planning anything, and that secrecy was my shield. Their laughter, their dismissive gestures, all of it fueled my resolve, and I silently promised myself that I would never feel powerless again. Even now, imagining the future, I felt a quiet, growing satisfaction, a whisper of what was to come, hinting at reversals that would leave them stunned. The days that followed were a relentless reminder that my mother's words were not a what-I'm cruelty, they were part of a lifelong pattern. At work, I felt a strange heaviness, as though every minor mistake was magnified in my mind, feeding the old narrative that I was incapable or inadequate. Friends would innocently repeat things my mother had said, or make jokes that stung deeper than they knew, leaving me questioning whether anyone could see me as more than a shadow. Even small errands became arenas of subtle humiliation. A neighbor's offhanded remark about my appearance, a cousin's teasing over my modest holiday gift, the familiar twinge of inadequacy that had always accompanied family gatherings. Each slight, the minor in isolation, accumulated into a deluge of recognition. This was who I had been to them all along. I began replaying old interactions in my mind, noticing how patterns repeated themselves: favoritism, dismissive gestures, and the quiet, mocking smiles that followed me wherever I went. The cumulative effect was maddening, a constant reminder of how powerless I had been for so long. Yet, Amid the sting and frustration, my resolve only hardened. Every instance of mockery, every laugh at my expense, became fuel for the quiet fire I had begun to nurture. The unfairness was undeniable, and I could feel it shaping my strategy, sharpening my awareness of vulnerabilities and opportunities alike. They didn't realize it yet, but each small humiliation was engraving a map of the path I would walk to reclaim everything they had tried to deny me. Just when I felt completely invisible, like no one in the world could see the weight I carried, a voice reached through the fog. It came not from my mother or siblings, but from someone I had often overlooked or cousin I rarely spoke to, someone who had quietly observed our family dynamics for years. They pulled me aside one afternoon, their tone gentle but firm, and said words I hadn't heard in a long time. "You don't deserve this. I see what's happening, and I want to help." For the first time in forever, I felt my experiences validated, like someone truly recognized the pattern of neglect and cruelty I had endured. They offered advice, practical suggestions for reclaiming my power, and even connections that could help me gain leverage without revealing my intentions. It was subtle, careful guidance, nothing flashy, nothing that could be traced back to them, just encouragement and tools to navigate the family's toxic terrain. Sitting there, listening to them, I realized I wasn't alone. Someone had my back, quietly rooting for me while remaining off the radar. For the first time in years, hope flickered in my chest. I allowed myself a small smile, a rare moment of relief. Feeling the tight knot of loneliness is just a little. The ember of resolve I had started to nurture now felt like a steady flame, fed by this unexpected support, and I knew with certainty that my plan could move forward. With guidance and encouragement, the path ahead seemed not only possible, but inevitable, and the thought of taking control of my life for the first time filled me with a cautious, exhilarating optimism. I began executing the first steps of my plan with a careful, almost surgical precision. No one in the family suspected a thing. They continued to treat me as they always had, laughing at imagined shortcomings and dismissing my presence, completely unaware that I was quietly building leverage. I focused on opportunities they had never considered, a business proposal that would earn me recognition in circles my mother prided herself on, networking with colleagues who could amplify my credibility, and subtly positioning myself in ways that increased my independence and influence. Each small success felt like a secret victory, a quiet reclamation of the respect I had been denied. The contrast between my private triumphs and their perception of me as weak was intoxicating. I relished knowing that while they continued to mock, I was quietly laying the foundation for a reversal that would leave them stunned. Emails, meetings, and phone calls became tools of empowerment, each one carefully calculated, each one a step toward unshakable footing. I felt my confidence growing, and for the first time, I could see the disparity between their assumptions and reality. The child they had dismissed as powerless was steadily becoming someone they could not ignore. That growing awareness fueled my determination. Every laugh they had ever thrown my way, every roll of the eyes, every subtle dismissal, it all became fuel, turning humiliation into strategic advantage. By the time they noticed the change, it would be too late. And as I closed another successful deal and allowed myself a private, triumphant smile, I understood the power of patience, stealth, and deliberate action. The stage was set, and the first reversal had already begun. The next family gathering arrived like any other, but I walked in carrying a weightless confidence that startled even me. The room smelled of roasted pine and cinnamon, familiar chatter filling the air. But this time, I didn't shrink to the edges. When my mother opened her mouth for a cutting remark, I met her gaze steadily, refusing to flinch. For the first time, I spoke with a calm authority that silenced the usual ripple of laughter and whispered comments. "I'd like to be included in the discussion this time," I said, my voice steady, deliberate, carrying an unspoken weight that even she could feel. The room paused. My siblings exchanged quick glances, confused by the shift, while my cousins whispered quietly, sensing the subtle change in dynamics. My mother's smirk faltered for the first time in years, a flicker of surprise passing over her face, and I could see the faint shadow of unease in her eyes. I didn't overdo it, I simply held my ground, letting my words, demeanor, and quiet authority do the work. The small victories of acknowledgement, subtle nods of agreement from relatives who had always ignored me, felt like cracks forming in the foundation she had built to control and belittle me. In that moment, I realized the first seeds of doubt had taken root in her mind, and the anticipation of what was to come surged through me. I left the gathering that night with a simmering thrill, knowing this was only the beginning and that the coming reversal would be far more impactful. I spent weeks carefully laying the groundwork, each small step meticulously planned so that the culmination would be undeniable. The opportunity presented itself during a formal family event or charity gala that my mother adored, where appearances mattered above all else. I had quietly gathered proof of her favoritism and hypocrisy over the years, financial records showing unequal inheritances, letters and messages revealing her blatant double standards, and testimonials from relatives and family friends who had quietly observed her behavior. That night, I didn't confront her directly. Instead, I orchestrated a subtle unveiling while she mingled, boasting about her generosity and moral superiority. I allowed key details to surface naturally, documents, whispered confirmations, and carefully placed acknowledgments from respected figures. The reactions were immediate. Her forced smile faltered, her words stumbled, and she glanced around, desperate for support that wasn't coming. Whispers spread through the crowd as the contrast between her self-image and the reality I revealed became impossible to ignore. I stood there, composed, smiling politely, letting the truth speak louder than any accusation I could make. For the first time, she was visibly embarrassed in public, the laughter of friends turning into murmurs of disbelief. The satisfaction was almost dizzying, watching the mother who had belittled me for decades struggle to maintain her composure, while the reality of her favoritism and hypocrisy was laid bare. That evening marked a turning point, a powerful statement that the tables could turn, and the first taste of public justice fueled the fire of the reversals yet to come. The day I had quietly been building toward arrived with a sense of inevitability that sent a thrill through me. It was the annual family reunion, a sprawling event where relatives from near and far gathered, all under the careful scrutiny of my mother, who took great pride in controlling appearances. But this time, everything had changed. I arrived not as the overlooked, timid family member, but as someone whose presence carried weight, influence, and a carefully constructed authority no one could ignore. The plan unfolded flawlessly. I had arranged for key documents, witnesses, and public acknowledgments to converge at the perfect moment, exposing years of favoritism, hypocrisy, and manipulation. As my mother attempted her usual displays of superiority, subtle jabs, sharp comments, and self-satisfied smiles, the evidence surfaced. The financial disparities she had tried to hide, the letters she had written praising others while diminishing me, the quiet confirmations from relatives who had long resented her duplicity, all came to light in front of everyone she cared about. The room froze, whispers swelled into stunned murmurs, and then laughter, not hers, but from those who finally recognized the truth, filled the space. Her face drained of color, her mouth opened and closed like she was searching for words that would not come. Every subtle smirk she had directed at me over the years, every public dismissal, seemed to vanish in that instant, replaced with raw, unguarded embarrassment. I stood there, composed, letting the moment stretch, savoring the complete reversal of roles. I wasn't cruel. I didn't need to be. The sheer visibility of the truth, the undeniable evidence, and the collective recognition of my worth delivered the karma in full force. For the first time, she was powerless while I held the authority, the respect, and the quiet satisfaction of someone who had endured and risen above. By the end of the evening, it was unmistakable. The tables had turned completely, and I had claimed my long overdue triumph. After the reunion, I finally allowed myself to breathe. The adrenaline that had carried me through the carefully orchestrated exposure slowly faded, leaving a profound sense of relief I hadn't felt in years. For so long, I had carried the weight of humiliation, the gnawing sense of inadequacy that my mother and family had imposed on me, and now it felt lifted, replaced with a quiet, undeniable confidence. I reflected on the countless moments of rejection, the dinners where I had been ignored, the laughter that had cut deeper than any words could, and I realized just how far I had come. I felt empowered not because I had humiliated my mother in return, but because I had taken control of my life, claimed my voice, and proven my worth on my own terms. For the first time, I could look back on those painful memories without them defining me, understanding that they had only made me stronger, more resilient, and more capable of navigating the complex dynamics of my family. The contrast between the powerless, anxious person I had been and the composed, self-assured individual I had become was stark, almost surreal. I knew some relationships would never be repaired, that certain family members might continue to resent or misunderstand me, but I no longer carried the need for their validation. The relief was accompanied by a sense of clarity. I had survived their cruelty, reclaimed my dignity, and set boundaries that would protect me moving forward. And in that quiet, reflective space, I finally felt the peace and satisfaction of someone who had endured, grown, and emerged whole, ready to embrace life without fear or shame. In the days following the reunion, the atmosphere among extended family shifted in ways I had anticipated, but still found astonishing. Some relatives approached me cautiously, offering tentative apologies for their previous silence, awkward attempts at reconciliation, or quiet acknowledgement of my efforts. Their voices carried a mixture of admiration and relief, as if they had been waiting for someone to finally challenge the imbalance they had long witnessed. Others, predictably, remained aligned with my mother, their judgmental stares and subtle comments serving as reminders that loyalty to her came before truth or fairness. Conversations became careful dances, with whispers and side glances revealing unspoken opinions, alliances, and grudges. I noticed how power dynamics had altered, how the mother who once commanded and questioned authority now navigated the same spaces with uncertainty. Forced to reckon with the consequences of her actions, I felt a sense of quiet satisfaction watching the ripple effects unfold, small victories of acknowledgement, cautious respect, and the subtle recalibration of family hierarchy. At the same time, I remained aware that not everyone would accept change, that some would cling to old loyalties and resist the new reality. The tension between validation and opposition heightened the stakes, reminding me that reclaiming my voice and influence was not a singular event, but a process with social consequences that would continue to test both my patience and resilience. And yet, amidst the cautious nods and lingering judgment, I felt a renewed sense of self, stronger and more grounded than ever before, ready to navigate these shifting relationships with confidence. Sitting alone one evening, I allowed myself to look back on the journey with a clarity I had never possessed before. The humiliation, the favoritism, the constant undermining, they had all shaped me, but they no longer held power over me. I understood now the importance of setting personal boundaries, of refusing to let others dictate my value or define my identity. Emotional resilience had become my armor. Every slight, every dismissive comment had been a test I had survived, building strength I didn't know I had. I also recognized the quiet courage it had taken to plan my reversals thoughtfully, to act with patience rather than impulsive anger, and to claim my dignity without losing my integrity. There was a bittersweet element to these reflections. Family bonds had been fractured, and some relationships would never heal fully. Yet the empowerment I felt outweighed the lingering sadness. I had proven, first to myself and then publicly, that endurance and intelligence could triumph over cruelty and neglect. Most importantly, I had reclaimed my sense of self-worth, no longer dependent on approval or validation from those who had consistently dismissed me. As I traced the contrast between who I had been timid, silenced, overlooked, and who I had become assertive, respected, and unwavering, I felt a quiet, enduring satisfaction. I had transformed years of suffering into lessons, strength, and a moral victory. And in that moment, I finally understood that true empowerment came not from retaliation alone, but from embracing my own value and refusing to let anyone diminish it again. A year later, I found myself standing in my home, the scent of pine and cinnamon once again filling the air. But this time it was different. The tree sparkled with ornaments I had chosen myself, each one a small emblem of the life I had built, the boundaries I had set, and the victories I had quietly claimed. I sat down with a cup of tea, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire crackling in the hearth. It was the warmth of peace, of knowing I had endured, acted, and emerged stronger. I reflected on the past holiday that had been so cruel, on the laughter that had once cut me down, and I allowed a soft smile to form. I had transformed the humiliation into fuel, and it had carried me to milestones I hadn't dared imagine, career achievements, social respect, and a newfound sense of self that no one could diminish. Friends and supportive relatives celebrated with me, their presence genuine and free of pretense, a stark contrast to the orchestrated displays of years past. I thought of my mother and the others who had once wielded control. They remained part of my story, but they no longer had power over my emotions or my choices. The satisfaction was subtle yet profound, a lingering sense of justice not through cruelty, but through the undeniable strength and growth I had cultivated. As I lifted my cup, I realized that this Christmas, this moment, symbolized far more than a holiday celebration. It was a quiet victory, a declaration of resilience, and a testament to the power of patience, strategy, and self-respect. I let the soft glow of the lights fill me with calm pride, knowing that I had not only survived their cruelty, but had risen above it, leaving a lasting mark of empowerment and emotional triumph.